У мене є свій.
Так, шановні колеги, вітаємо.
Dear colleagues, welcome in Ukrainian Crisis Media Center. Our event is a little bit late, but it is very useful, topical. We will have a discussion on the project on amending of draft law on the policy in the area of communal services, and was already pronounced that the topic is very timely, appeared. This issue has been discussed in the standing committee of Ukrainian Parliament, so we have a chance to continue our discussion and to discuss the next steps. So I give floor to Ms. Olga Belkova, People Deputy of Ukraine, and thank you very much. We already had the meeting of so-called Strategic Group with participation of People's Deputies, members of the Standing Committee for Fuel and Strategic Complex, as well as people that represent the committees on communal services. I would like to start up with the fact you mentioned that this press conference is a little bit late in time, but we are speaking about working on this draft law. It's our responsibility from our past for all the political elite, and this project has been already discussed for a chain of years, and our intention was, as a strategic group, to put the end to this process and finally to propose to Ukrainian Parliament, Ukrainian nation, to establish very powerful regulator in the markets of energy and communal services. This is not a trivial task, because we tried to cover not only the hopes of Ukrainian voters, but as well to include all the requirements, standard for all the countries of energy community. That's why we involved our international colleagues that are present in this meeting today, and we had several tasks. One of them was the major one. What requirements of international community we do have, and what are the best practices in the activity of regulators in the other countries. In these 2 days we had a very vivid discussions around all the problems that covered by this draft law. We've already discussed the legal status of this commission, the way members and employees of this commission will be elected, what will be sources of financing of this independent regulator, and the way the disputes will be settled. The government already submitted its version. We worked according to that, and my estimate is 60 to 70% of the draft law will be intact. We have a chain of issues that we'll propose to our government, and we will suggest that they will take it into account. So probably the government will resubmit the draft law if they take into notice all of our comments, or we will set up a team of politicians. They will be active enough to submit their own draft law, and since we are speaking about communal services as well, I give floor to Olena Pavlenko, that is she is representing a committee that is responsible for communal services. Good afternoon, everybody. And in fact, the work on the draft law on the activity of regulator that will be involved in control over energy markets, markets for electricity and gas, as well as the activity of businesses working in the market of water supply, heat supply. This is very difficult issue. We expected that the committees on fuel and energy and on communal services in our mind should be involved in these draft law amendments and changes, but we would like to cover all the sides of the market. And of course we understand that there are differences in regulation of this market and control over the market, because electricity is the generic type of market. Thermal, hot water supply is this is local markets. So we should discuss these with different approaches, as well as different approaches should be exercised in investment programs for businesses that provide the services in local markets. Why? Because it is for consumer. It is not important who will supply, but it is very important for them to what extent the investment proposals are grounded, the proposals for their own community, local community. Those communities should understand how it is being done. It was very difficult for us to understand how to provide for independence of this regulator. We've already have seen that such issues like tariffs, they now a subject of political fighting, and we must avoid this, because government is not an auxiliary institution to the presidential administration or something like that. It must be independent body, professional institution, and the decisions should be made through open procedures, transparently, with involvement of all stakeholders, and hopefully we will find proper legal provisions that will enable that. I give floor to Mr. Johannes Bauer, who represents the group of support for Ukraine in European Commission, and he has already been participating in the discussion on this draft law.
Thank you very much. Thank you also to the organizers and to the Rada for organizing this event. I think it is important that the discussions on this law gain some momentum, that this law is being adopted very soon. This law plays a very important role for the Ukrainian energy market to be well functioning. It is indeed, as Ms. Babak and others have already said, that there is an independent and strong regulator, independent from the business, independent from political influence, in order to regulate, to oversee and to monitor the energy and utilities market in Ukraine. This is not only very important for Ukraine itself, it is also a requirement Ukraine has undertaken in the context of the Energy Community Treaty and the Association Agreement. We think that the discussions today and yesterday were very useful to clarify some positions. There will be probably some amendments being proposed to the proposal made by the government. For us, it is important that this law is indeed being adopted soon, can come back to Rada for a final adoption. Thank you.
Thank you, Johannes. I want to invite Lapalainen, the legal expert from UCAD, to give his opinion.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. As said, I represent the United States Agency for International Development, USAID, and I come from Finland, which is a country with lots of district heating. We were just discussing district heating related issues, which will also be regulated by this new piece of legislation, which is extremely important, and it is also important that the new law will be adopted as soon as possible. It is a vital condition for further development of the district heating systems in Ukraine and for other branches of the energy industry. So the law will address regulation of all subsectors of the energy business. I came to this country for the first time as an international consultant 12 years ago in 2003, and before the Orange Revolution, and the issues that were on table at that time were very much the same as today. But I must say that I'm really impressed by what I have seen during these past few weeks when I worked for this project with the USAID. It's like night and day. Ukraine has gone so much forward in legislative processes, in administration, in openness, in actual willingness to change and introduce reforms. And one of the most important, if not the most important, sectors of a national economy that should be reformed and reformed quickly is energy. Thank you.
As well, a representative of Italian regulator, Mr. Antonio Colaveccio, the floor is yours.
The invitation to participate to this important meeting, and I'd like to express my appreciation, first of all, about the working method in construction of the draft law. It is a working method very open, very transparent, and frankly conduct with open to other countries of European Union experience. For example, in Italy we have a regulatory energy experience since 20 years, and in this occasion I've tried to offer my experience about Italian regulation in energy sector, for example, about opening procedures to develop the regulation, participation of stakeholders, notice and comment, and because it is very important for the regulator that it is an independent body, but isn't the direct representative for people. It is not elective body. It is very important to have a democratic way of construction its rules. So it is very important, for example, notice and comment procedure, to have observation, remarks on its draft of rules, for example. And I'd like also to say that it is very important for Ukraine, but for every democratic state, to have an independent and professional body for regulation in energy field, because it is very important to have a regulatory framework, transparent and clear, stable, to attract investment that are absolutely necessary to promote competitivity in this crucial sector of economy, and to obtain benefits not only for business, but also, this is the final objective, the final task of every regulator, to increase benefits for all consumers. Thank you.
The very important role as well is played by Ukrainian experts in activity of this working group. Ms. Olena Pavlenko, President of Analytical Center DiXi Group. She is involved very actively in this.
Thank you very much.
American presidents already said that give me 6 hours to cut a tree. 3 of them I will use to sharpen my axe. So you were speaking about regulator. Now we are trying to sharpen the axe, meaning to create a regulator. This process is already been lasted for a long time. And hopefully we will not only have the agreed upon option or agreed upon edition of this law, but hopefully this law will enable that a regulator will be really open, transparent, independent. So in fact we are grateful to all the parliamentarians took part in this work that helped us, assisted us to create high quality document, and we will be watching closely and follow up this draft law as well. I would like to say that we hope that this draft law will be adopted in the shortened possible time, probably until the end of this year, because we have a new gas market, and in the nearest future we will have another law on electricity market. But unless we have independent regulator, both laws will not work, because no way that we will have proper tariffs and prices if we don't have the regulator. So the independent and efficient regulator is a key component of all that. So we will work on that, and this tool must be very efficient. Thank you, Olena. Are there any questions or comments on that?
Dear colleagues, my name is Pervertov Andrei. I'm an expert of energy reforms. 2 questions. One is not convenient. As one for understanding, unfortunately, I didn't take a part in discussion, but I know the history of how long discussion. So I would like to know: is there any compromise about who will appoint the first person of regulation? Maybe my colleagues will tell us how it happens in other countries. And second question is, we with colleagues, we are developing the topic of energy ombudsman. Did you discuss this topic in Verkhovna Rada? And do my colleagues from abroad support this idea of energy ombudsman in Ukraine? I can start from that political non-convenient question you're asking. I'm thankful to you to your question, because it's one of the questions that stops the implementation of this law. I think that this composition of Verkhovna Rada is obliged to take this law, is obliged to find the compromise, and in the future, all those who will influence to the nominations of the members of the Commission, I mean President, Cabinet of Ministers, and Verkhovna Rada, these 3 powers of authorities are designed, are potential to nominate the Commission, and it's foreseen that first of all the nomination committee will be made with the same principle as it was with Anti-Corruption Bureau, and then the same composition will consider all the candidates that will be given. And there are some variations from different political forces about proportions, in what proportion President's power will be presented, Cabinet of Ministers and Verkhovna Rada. But general understanding is the decision will go through nomination commission, and then the members of the commission will vote themselves by secret voting, the head of the commission. And the second question, I'm grateful to you also for this question. We were discussing today the possibility of having the energy ombudsman. It was at the beginning of our discussion, but we all agreed that it's not the topic of this law. So it's supposed to be separate law to describe the functions and responsibility of energy ombudsman. That's a kind of additional measure to regulate this market. About first question, I just remembered, and I want my colleagues to understand. I was analyzing myself the experience of many countries. This is a question that is supposed to be solved by every concrete country, depending on their structure. And it's very often we can hear that we didn't consult some international expert. All experts that I met on this issue, all of them told me that it depends on country itself. Only Ukraine can take the decision. And I want to repeat it, that please don't hide upon the requirements of some other countries. We should find the compromise. It's our task. Regarding the appointment of the head, I want to point out that the National Commission is a common body. So we are selecting 7 members and how to appoint them. In the new version of the law that the government approved, we decided that the Commission will be reporting to the President of Ukraine, because we thought that the nomination or appointment of the President will mean the subordination. But our colleagues from European Union told us that there is no way to have a phrase about reporting of the Commission to anybody. The President, the government, or Verkhovna Rada. There should not be the word subordination or reporting in this law at all. So at this stage of the discussion in our working group, we decided jointly we will eliminate this word from the text, and there won't be any phrase about reporting. There will be the phrase appointment. We had a discussion. Can we call the President of Ukraine the person who just signs something without giving evaluation to the documents he signs? Of course, it's disrespect to the status of the President, because he can't just sign something. But at the same time, we understand that if the President has the possibility to propose his candidate to the Commission, it's procedure already of President's participation in the appointment process through appointment of the person who will be the member of this Commission. So this is the first possibility for the President to take part in this process through participation in the Competition Commission. And the second, as alternative, to give the possibility to the President to select among 2 candidates that will be proposed by this Commission that will select the members of the Commission. To give the possibility to propose 2 candidates, and among them, President can select. We can discuss for and against, because President should have more formal function, yes or no, but for the time being, we kept the proposition to propose 2 candidates for President. So in this way, we were trying to implement this independence of this body. Is it all? About Ombudsman, it's better we will give the possibility to our colleagues to comment.
Yes, the institution of Ombudsman was actually originally invented in neighboring country to Finland, Sweden. The word is Swedish, actually. It means representative or caretaker, some kind. And there are ombudsmen.
Існують омбудсмени у багатьох законодавствах, скажімо, в Австралії, в США, але завжди вони грають роль у залагодженні суперечок, напружених моментів між постачальниками та споживачами. І іноді з малим бізнесом. Крім того, компанії, які постачають газ, електроенергію цим малим бізнесам, дуже часто такі суперечки точаться навколо проблем обслуговування, переривання обслуговування або дуже високих цін. Ви можете уявити, що ви маєте велику з одного боку енергопостачальну компанію і невеличкого споживача з іншого боку. Звичайно ж, одна з сторін має набагато більшу перевагу. А розмір таких суперечок дуже невеличкий, це кілька сотень гривень, але якась бабушка, яка вважає, що її дурять, вона, звичайно, буде намагатися добитися правди, і дуже часто вони вдаються до послуг омбудсмена. І досить часто в них нема можливостей в таких людей найняти адвоката або юриста для того, щоб розбиратися в цих питаннях. Дякую. Звичайно, це таке чутливе питання, як пані Белкова сказала. Є 28 різних процедур призначення, є деякі принципи, які відображені в цьому законопроекті. Процедури повинні бути прозорими. Такі процедури повинні забезпечувати незалежність регулятора. І, звичайно, ми говоримо про тих, хто приймає рішення в політиці. Вони повинні дійти якогось компромісу, тому що дуже важливими новими установами в Україні, в тому числі регулятором, ці компроміси повинні бути знайдені. Of course, we have very painful issues, and even having this procedure of appointment complicated, we nevertheless will come to a certain level of productivity. Colleagues, do you have any more issues? Igor Moskalevich, Mirror Weekly. When this draft law will be submitted to Parliament, of course, it will be next convocation, but what chances that it will be considered until the end of the year, and what time it will appear? Most probably you had in your mind not convocation, but session, because convocation is still this convocation. You hope that this convocation will last for a longer time. Okay. Thank you for your question. In fact, this is not a trivial process when we open these wide discussions, when we set up Strategic Group, and in our Committee on Fuel and Energy, this draft law, in my memory, we've already considered it 3 times. So now, politically, we have understanding that this version of the draft law that is registered in Parliament does not have proper support. The result of our work hopefully will be approved or coordinated until the end of this week. We will have conclusions of our international colleagues, and we will elevate it as recommended draft law to be considered by Ukrainian government. And when government will when government has its consideration on the quality of this draft law, the next step will be done. One of the options is to submit their own draft law, or they will submit our draft law, our version. If this version of draft law will be supported at the first reading in the next session of Ukrainian Parliament, then all the changes will be made between first and second hearing in the Parliament, and then we expect that it must be tied up to certain financial expectations, and then it must have until the end of the year passed through all the committees and Parliament. If no more questions, then probably...
Well, I would like to underline here and emphasize that rapid adoption of this piece of legislation is of the essence. Time is of the essence here, and I can, of course, only speak with some authority from the USAID, which represents the State Department. But this piece of legislation has been long in coming, and now it is high time to have it passed. A piece of legislation will never be perfect. There will be always some problems, some internal contradictions perhaps, but those can be rectified later on. Now it's time to prepare this important, absolutely necessary tool, which will make it possible for the Regulatory Commission to work properly.
Я хочу сказати, що насправді
in fact, in spite of limitation in time, we should not be very fast in adoption of this law. Why? Because we must brush it up to certain acceptable shape, because most probably this will be one of the laws in a new piece of legislation or legislative framework for regulation of new Ukrainian environment. Means we have a law on regulation of on environmental issues, which provides for having another regulator, and if this will be new regulator for this sector, energy sector, most probably it will be the similar procedure for other regulators, like in transport sector, in financial services, etc. So our responsibility now is to tailor the law which will be the greatly acceptable for next similar draft laws, greatly acceptable in sense to tailor up new laws, similar laws on regulators. Thank you for your question, thank you for your comments. And finally, we often have very active discussion on demonopolization, de-oligarchization. In many cases, it is associated with energy market, putting energy market in law and order. What is your vision on the role of regulator in such big conceptual developments that are started now to be actively discussed in Ukrainian society? Thank you. It is difficult as a rule to explain what is regulator, what law should be adopted for plain Ukrainian citizen. If somebody asks me why strong regulator for Ukraine, because Ukrainian citizens should have high quality services, specifically in the part when they do not have a great choice. So we must have legislative initiatives. This is our task, to create efficient, transparent, open markets, including the energy sector markets, which is very important for any plain Ukrainian. So nobody makes any explanation if this is natural monopolies or non-natural monopolies. This is the task for regulators. the regulator must put the everything in place, means who, for what price and what tariffs provides services, to what extent those services is in line with the global standards, if they meet expectations of consumers, and we could not speak about any reformation of communal services market if we do not have strong regulators that in fact will be responsible for introduction of such regulations. Anybody who uses any levers to to make delays in this process, they are trying to protect the monopolistic situation in the market. If we are speaking on the demonopolization, we must be very selective in this sense when we are speaking about state regulation.
For example, water supply sphere in the world is not at all demonopolized because it's natural monopolization. It's not profitable to have few system of water supply. That's why most of examples of water supply is natural monopoly that needs to be regulated, because consumer doesn't have a possibility to select some other or alternative supplier of this service. In the same way, gas transportation, for example, when it's not profitable to have few networks, there will be just one network, so it needs to be regulated. If to talk about heat supply, unfortunately in Ukraine we understand this is monopoly sphere that needs to be regulated. That regulator is that kind of mediator between consumer and supplier and state as well, that is still subsidizing our consumers through some social mechanisms, through other mechanisms. And through the activities of the regulator, we need to find the balance of all the participants of the process of production and giving of the services and energy goods. Also, it was very interesting during this work to listen from our colleagues, our Italian colleagues, that we used to think in Ukraine that we need regulator if there is some activity, licensed activity, and we will give licenses from the part of regulating body, and we will look how his license holder makes his obligations. But in reality, market liberalization, for example, natural gas liberalization, when we have a possibility to select the supplier of gas, when we have in theory we can select the gas producer. In Europe, in America, regulator is playing the role of this person who will monitor the market that is not in the state of natural monopoly or just monopoly. Its function transforms, and he needs to have some other functions that we and our regulators are not accustomed. So we were trying to write down some responsibility or what our regulator will check, just some standards or something. But we understand that today we need to find the place of our regulating body in the context of market formation that were monopoly before, to provide the smooth transfer process from monopoly market to functional market where we have choice.
I can add that the role of independent regulator in liberalized market is very central, very important. You have to think that liberalized markets in energy in particular are not Wild West markets, but are regulated markets with specific rules to promote competitivity, and so this is a typical function of the regulator, to promote competitivity and to protect interests of consumers. So the role of a regulator is in the transition from monopoly regime to liberalized markets, is to guarantee the interests of consumers, promoting competitivity, because if competitivity level is higher, interests and benefit for consumers also will be higher.
I can just add that without strong regulator we have no chance to involve quality investments, to bring foreign investors here, and in this way we can't talk about quality demonopolization. Last time in our press conference we were discussing regulation with mediators. So how we can discuss fair football game if mediator is weak or he doesn't regulate it in a good way? The same situation is with our markets, because it's very easy to manipulate them. If there are no any questions or comments, I would like to thank our participants for their work, first of all, because really energy sphere is very sensitive, as all our discussions in Ukraine Crisis Media Center show us, and we keep following the development and energy reform, and we will invite the colleagues in the future to inform us about what's going on now, and we wish you any luck on working on this law. Thank you very much, and was press briefing about working of Strategic Consulting Group, editing draft law about the National Commission for State Regulation in Energy and Utilities. Thank you very much for your work.